Sure. All right, so to recap, what we've done is we took this chip out of the Zelda cartridge, and this chip has all of the source code for the game on it, basically. Or not really the source code, but the compiled assembly that the NES uses to run it. So we ripped that file and we made a ROM out of it so that we can play it on an emulator on the computer that has a lot of reverse engineering tools built into it. And then what we're going to do is we're going to make all of those changes to that ROM, and then we're going to basically flash that ROM onto this EEPROM chip. And then we have this socket that we've cut a little window for on this cartridge, so we can swap the chips in and out easily. And then once we have this EEPROM programmed with all of our modifications, we'll be able to put it back in here and play it on a normal piece of Nintendo hardware with our new hacks and improvements. Improvements is our own remix of Zelda. So.
And how does that relate to hack and slash, do you think?
Well, I mean, this is a lot about what hack and slash is about, is taking a game that presents itself as one way and then basically taking it and making it your own, customizing it to not necessarily, improve the game, but make it more about what you want it to be and what you understand it to be. It's one thing to beat a game, it's another thing altogether to understand the game well enough to be able to hack it. It's its own kind of mastery. It's a very rewarding thing. And I think we'll make a cool version of the game that we'll publish the IPS file, which is common format for shipping ROM patches, on the internet, and maybe find a way to give this cart away to somebody.
And you're doing all this because you're not very good at beating the game.
Oh yeah, I don't actually know if I can get past the whiz robes in level 8 legitimately, so we'll make some changes so that maybe really what I'm doing is I'm just finally making the version of Zelda that I can play all the way through. So, without cheating this time, because I cheated before I started playing. Okay, so we're back in the game now, but we're playing it here in an emulator instead of on the console. That's going to allow us to figure out all of the changes that we need to make in order to hack the game the way that we want to. So the first thing that we need to do, though, is track down all of the locations in memory that we want to exert control over. And so I'm going to use some of the data inspection tools in order to find the locations in memory that we care about, and then we can work backwards from there to figure out how to make the changes that we want to. Okay, so the first thing that we want to look at is this RAM search box. And what this is showing us is this is every address in memory for the game. And it's showing us their current values. I'm going to hit reset real quick. And it's showing you, so the columns here are, here's the current value for this piece of memory. This is the previous value, the last time that we searched or hit the reset button, and this is how many changes have been made to that variable over the course of the programming running. So let's say, for example, we wanted to figure out where our health is stored in memory. So our health hasn't changed, so if I say that we should compare to the previous value and we should filter everything that's equal to its previous value, since our health hasn't changed, that value should be stable. So I can hit search, and not much went away, but we dropped out some variables. We still have 10,000 possible locations in memory, though. But fortunately, we can come up here, our health still hasn't changed, so I can hit the search button again. We can just go get hit by a monster, take a little bit of damage, and come back here where we're safe. And we can say, now we actually want to filter to all the values that aren't equal to their previous search result. So now we're down to 19 values. We can just kind of bounce back and forth this way, kind of filtering down, looking for values that are stable as we wander around, even though we know we're changing other variables in the program. See, at this point, we're down to a pretty small number of variables, actually. Let's go get hit again. See what that does. None of these values are actually looking very plausible. I'm wondering if the representation of this number is more complicated than just showing like how many hearts you have. I'm going to try again, and I'm going to take a more significant amount of damage so that we can see if we can track this value correctly. So I'm going to just filter down through some of the variables that are changing all the time, so we don't have to worry about those so much. Let's go take a couple hits of damage. let's see which values changed. Okay, we're down to 62. But we see in a lot of stuff, all the stuff in red is stuff that has changed, and so we're gonna keep eliminating that stuff. A lot of this stuff is kind of meticulously experimenting with this, filtering stuff down. This value is pretty interesting right here. It's changed 4 times, which is roughly the amount of times we've been hit since we started filtering this stuff. Let's just experiment with it. Let's do this. We can look at this value in memory, and we can tell it that we want to find it in the hex editor. And so this is, I'm going to change this to a hexadecimal display so I get less confused. But this hex editor is actually showing the contents in memory, and so you can actually see things changing dynamically as the game is running in the background. But one of the nice things that we can do here is we can say that we want to add a breakpoint for any time something writes to this address. And so what will happen is that the program will actually stop execution if this value changes on us again. So, all right, so we just got hit by a monster, and that value has changed. So I'm going to guess that this is actually our health value. So let's see if we can get that value preserved. Let's go set this to a larger number, like 32, and then freeze it in place, so that even if the program thinks that it can write to that variable, it won't actually take effect. That's actually how most Game Genie codes work. The Game Genie code looks like a random collection of letters, but it decodes to an address and a value, so that when the NES tries to read from that address in the program, it always gets back the value that the Game Genie reports to it instead of the one that it thought it had. Let's resume execution here. Oh, and we have 4 hearts now. I'm going to clear this breakpoint so we... So yeah, you can see we're taking a half heart of damage, but our health is always filling that up. So I'm guessing that the variables for health are actually spread across a couple of different variables in memory, but I think we got the most important one. We're basically invincible now. So I'm going to write down, I'm going to take some notes while I'm going through this to make sure that I have a physical copy in case we need to redo any of this work. But 66F appears to be the whole heart memory location. So that's one useful piece of data. All right, so going back to the change that we actually want to be making, we want to make it so that you don't have to walk down into this cave and grab the sword in order to complete the game. We want you to be able to get through the game without having done that. And so what we need to do in order to do that is to figure out basically what it means to get the sword so that we can account for that later in the game. So I'm going to do the same thing that we were doing before, where we're looking for memory values, and hopefully this will be a little less complicated this time. We'll come back up to the RAM search window here. We'll reset it. We'll filter out all the stuff that is just kind of changing all the time. And I'm going to do something a little more complicated here, and I'm going to say, let's look at all of the memory locations equal to 0. Because I'm guessing that the thing that controls whether or not we have a sword is basically a Boolean value that tells us that whether or not we have it. So I'm going to search for all the locations in memory that exactly equal 0. And there will be a bunch still. There's still 3,000 possibilities. But when we pick up the sword, now I'm going to look for locations in memory that have a 1 stored in them. Oh, there's only 2 values. Okay, that's good. So I'm not sure which of these 2 values is the one that's likely to cause it. So why don't we come to each of these locations in the hex editor. So here's 657. Oh, no, this is 657. All right, so let's add a breakpoint for this guy. See when it's written. And then I'm just going to reset the console here. That's promising, actually, because what that likely means is that the code that's handling loading save states is touching that variable. So it's very likely that it's tied in some way to whether or not we have a sword. So let's just go repeat that action that we performed earlier. Pick up that sword. All right. And yes, it looks like as soon as we touch the sword, it's executing a piece of code that's assigning into this memory location. And then it's storing This STA, it stands for store register A, which has the contents of 1 into this memory location. And that memory location is currently 0, so we're going to change that value to 1. So let's let that run. Okay, so I'm going to guess that this location in memory is the value that we're looking for. And so what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to come in here and I'm going to name it. We can add a symbolic debug name. We can say that this is a sword variable. And then when we see that line in code, we can actually see this reference to the sword, so we'll know how that stuff is tracked. And I actually have a theory. I'm remembering now that Zelda, you get multiple swords over the course of the game, and it's probable that it just stores which sword you have in the specific variable. So let's just change this value to the next number and see if what effect that has on the game. Change that to a 2. Oh yeah, look at that. We've already got the white sword. All right, let's change it to a 3. Oh yeah, we've got the magic sword now. Okay, cool. Well, that's handy.
If you do 4, maybe there's an unused.
Maybe. Let's see what happens. It's a red sword. What is that? Want to keep changing it? Want to see what 5 does? Oh, back to the normal sword. Probably what's happening is that it's masking off. It's probably masking off the bits that it cares about, like the first 4 bits or whatever that it needs to count all of the sword types, and so it's looping through them again. I liked that 4 sword though. Let's run around with that. That looks cool.
Can you find out what that sword does? Does it have a different damage modifier?
Oh, it changed colors on me. I think this is a bugged sword. I like it. All right. Yeah, we'll see if it does anything differently. It's definitely killing dudes. Oh, that was like some kind of warp around thing? Maybe this is an unused sword. The way to actually investigate that more thoroughly is to look at the code that uses this value and analyze it to figure out what the sword routines are actually doing when you swing them. That's probably a little bit beyond the scope of what we'll be doing, or what we have time to do today, but yeah, if anybody wants to investigate what the cool red sword does. The main thing that I want to figure out now is what we need to do in order for you to be able to bypass Ganon without a sword. And we're not going to play through the whole game to figure out how to get through Ganon, but there are a couple of things I know. So in order to get through the last dungeon, you won't even be let into the dungeon unless you have the 8 pieces of the Triforce. And so we need to figure out how to, like instead of playing through and collecting all the Triforces, I want to quickly just play through this dungeon and find one Triforce and see if we can isolate its location in memory and then hack it to the number of values that we need. Yeah, it's blue now. I think it maybe is picking up like a palette color from somewhere that it didn't intend. So it's getting colorized by the dungeon or something. It works just fine as a sword though. Alright. It's nice being invincible. Actually, that'll be a really nice way to play through this game because like the exploration, like let's put a hack into the game that actually keeps the player invincible. Because like the exploration kind of comes, I'm showing this is a cool trick. For whatever reason, the way that the very first room is coded, if you walk out and back in, the door that normally has a keyhole starts open. So you get an extra key right at the beginning of the game, which is useful when you're progressing through it. But yeah, so like part of the game is exploring and finding all of these locations and, you know, figuring out which walls you can blow up to find secret pathways and stuff like that. But a lot of it is also experimenting with the creatures and figuring out how they work and strategies for dealing with them. And I would hate to turn that part of the game off. Like maybe making a mod that actually got rid of all of the monsters or something like that, even though the dungeons would probably be fun to explore on their own. But I do want to, I don't think the difficulty curve is necessarily a critical component of capturing what's so special about this game. So I think that like having invincibility still makes you like fight all the monsters so that you can get all of the doors to unlock and stuff, but lets you kind of explore it on your own terms, which I really like. Oh, that's right. This is where the dude is, giving us useful advice. That's also not how you spell peninsula. I don't think. I think it only has one N. One thing that I noticed in adulthood that I missed when I was a kid is that it looks like all of the dungeons are designed in patterns that are shaped like animals. Like this one has kind of a bird shape to it. There's a later one that I think is supposed to look like a lion. I think the final one is just really, really dense. There is a swastika one. That one's weird.
Yeah.
Oh, is it a skull? That's right. Another technique that's really useful for when you're using an emulator like this is you can actually, I should have been using these earlier, but yeah, you can use save states to capture the entire state of memory and then roll back to it quickly. So it's easy to, like if you're about to do something like that, like get an item that you can't undo, you can checkpoint just beforehand so you can analyze the variables before and after. Oh yeah, okay, this is a good one. So I think that you get the boomerang after you defeat all of these guys, if I remember correctly. All right, so there's our boomerang. So let's checkpoint our state. Let's reset this thing. I'm going to assume that the boomerang works like the sword. We'll look for everything that's currently 0. Then we'll go grab the boomerang. Then we'll go look for everything that's currently 1. Hey, I bet that's the boomerang. All right, so let's look at that in the hex editor. And then let's name it boomerang. Yeah, you want to try 2 and see what that does? Oh, it doesn't look like it does anything. I think that's just a normal boomerang. I don't think we have variants there. But let's verify if we set this guy to 0, we lose the boomerang. So that's definitely the location of the boomerang in memory. One of the things that's really nice about old NES games is the way that they render stuff to the screen is that every frame they have to choose which things to draw into which tiles. And so in a modern game, if you went and changed one of those variables, like there may be some complex UI system that is like encapsulating the idea of presenting the image of a boomerang to you that wouldn't be tied to the actual memory location that controls whether or not you have the boomerang. But these older games are actually often a lot easier to inspect because a lot of that information just sits right on the surface. Another thing that's interesting is that all of these memory locations have been really close together. So we've got the boomerang at 674. And we had the sword at 657. I'm guessing that basically that swath of memory contains all of the items in the game. I'm just going to go put 1s in all of these columns between the sword and the boomerang. Yeah, we're flashing. Let's see. I wonder, you think we have cool items? Oh man, we have everything. That's super cool. We've got arrows for the bow. Okay, so we've got some bombs. We've got 1 bomb. We have A keys. We've already got, let's see, the power bracelet and the master key, and we got everything. All right, cool. I wish I knew. I'm going to change some of these things to 2s. See if we can find, because the arrow actually has multiple forms, and eventually we're going to want the silver arrow in order to get into the end of the game. So let's try 2s. Oh, there it was. All right, here's our arrows. Okay. I'm going to change these guys back to 1 since the behavior seems to be kind of unknown. That sword works real well. All right, I don't really care about hearts. We don't need to track because we're kind of holding that value locked in position anyway. But we should get a Triforce piece from this room, and we do care about that.
Add any hearts in there?
Yeah, we locked the value of the hearts in memory so that we can probably set that to a much larger number now, but I mean, it doesn't matter because it's infinite at this point. So let's save our state again. Let's see if we can find the Triforce in memory here. Let's reset. Hopefully this works like the rest of the inventory. And then when we grab this guy. All right, so we found 2 values that changed in the way that we expected, but only this one has only changed once. So there's a good chance that that's the number of Triforce pieces we have. So let's go find that guy. Oh, it's in the same range. This is a treasure trove in here. This is where all the important stuff appears to be. Let's name this guy so that we can recognize it. And then verify that we have first little Triforce piece. Okay. So now, let's see. So we know where the Triforce is in memory. We know where the sword and most of the inventory items for the game are stored. We have the silver arrows, which we need to complete everything. We got a ton of equipment, which should be good to go. All right, we just need to get to the 9th dungeon, and I don't want to go through all of the steps to do that manually. So let's see if we can find, when we walk down this staircase, it's going to teleport us into a dungeon, but because the game has a second quest where all of the entrances are reprogrammed, I'm guessing that there's logic that executes when you walk in this door that tells you which dungeon to go to. So if we can find the location in memory that controls that, we can probably teleport. So let's reset our search here again. Let's assume that it's 0 when you're in the overworld. And then let's walk into this door. So now we're in level 1. Let's search for all the ones. Okay, that's not that many. That's promising. Let's go back out. Okay, we got a bunch of locations. Let's try this again. Search for zeros. Search for ones. Alright, so all of these values are changing in tandem when we walk in and out of that entrance and exit. So let's do a little bit more stuff and see if we can isolate some more stuff. So I just saw this guy flicker, so that guy is not going to be the value. These locations in memory are all pretty close together. This one seems to be the outlier, so that's an indicator that maybe it's distinct. I'm not able to get those other ones to change. Let's just speculatively assume that this guy is the variable. Let's walk back out real quick. Yeah, actually, this guy transitioned exactly as we walked out of the door, and these all transitioned as we finally got out of it. So since this one seemed to be the first one to change, I think this one's probably a good candidate. But I don't think that we can just go, we can try just changing this value, but like there's probably not any logic that's going to automatically warp us to the right place. We come in here and we can set this to a 1. And so there's no code that's running every frame that's looking to see what that value does. But what we can do is we can add a breakpoint for when this value is written. So that would be like when the program decided that it needed to change that value. So we'll walk in here. Right as we hit that door, it executes this code. It's going to store the contents of register A, which is 1, into this location in memory that we identified. So let's just try and we'll just change this value of this register so that it stores a 9 instead of that 1, and let it keep going and see what happens. Sweet. All right, cool. All right, we're in the final dungeon. Just walked in the front entrance. Okay, cool. Let's see. Okay, right. So we don't have all of the pieces of the Triforce. So we can't go in. But we know the location and memory of the Triforce. Okay, so here's all of our inventory values that we modified. Oh, here we go. You can see that it's actually named up there. We have it bookmarked. It says Triforce at the top here. So let's try changing that to an 8. Can we not see how many Triforce pieces we have when we're in the dungeon? I don't think we can. Let's just see if that was the right value. No. Okay. So something's not quite right yet. Let's head back out and take a closer look, see if we can find this guy again. Oh, I know what's going on. So I set that value to an 8 because I wanted 8 Triforce pieces. But it's probably not just counting the Triforces. It needs to keep track of whether you have each of them individually. So probably what it's doing is storing each of those as a bit. And so we want to encode a number here that, let's see, so there are 8 Triforce pieces, it's 8 bits. So probably if we just type in FF, which is the hexadecimal for all 1 bits in a 8-bit variable, thinking that we might have some luck. Yep, there's our full Triforce. Okay, cool. So I'm going to walk back in here. I'm going to do that same trick where we swap this register so that we teleport into the 9th dungeon. All right, we're back at level 9, and hopefully this guy will let us through. Sweet. All right, cool. We're doing good. We got this.
So don't you still have to play through the whole level?
Yeah, I think I remember the route to Ganon, though. We could potentially try and isolate the specific variables for like which. We could probably do that same trick where we're trying to figure out the coordinate for getting to the boss's chambers. But this part of the game's fun.
It's possible to like make all the bomb passages appear by having the already bombed.
Yeah, I remember reading a long time ago about the file format that Zelda uses for its dungeons, and it's really interesting. There's only a certain number of distinct layouts. But yeah, it's kind of complicated. It's like they have a template for a specific room layout, and then they have rules for which monsters spawn there, and then they have logic triggers that control how those rules influence and like which things have walls and what they're connected to and all that kind of stuff. And so that stuff is sort of buried deep in the data in a way that would, I'm certain that somebody has gone and done the work to analyze it, but it's going to be a little bit difficult just like looking for memory values to figure out how to adjust that stuff. Bombs are really useful for fighting bad guys. Maybe arrows would be even more useful, though. Oh, that's right. Arrows are tied to rupees. I wonder if we can find where the rupees are stored in memory. I want to get a lot of rupees, though. Let's see if we can just find the current number of rupees we have. Oh, sorry. Bet this is our... So let's do that same hack that we were doing earlier, where let's set this to a large value. Okay, I got 255 rupees now, and then let's just freeze this address. Okay. So now we have infinite arrows. Alright, good. We should do that with bombs, too. We gave ourselves bombs earlier, so one of these values that went to 0 must be the bomb value. Let's see if this one... Yep, that's bombs. Man, this is going swimmingly. Let's freeze this in place, too. Okay, we have a whole bunch of... We have infinite bombs and arrows. It should make it a little easier to get through this dungeon.
It's weird because the max is usually 12 or 16, or you can't get that high.
Oh, can you not get that high normally? There may be logic in the code that handles adding bombs to your inventory that make it possible to... or that control whether or not you can actually get above a certain number, but if that value is already just a large value in memory, a lot of games just don't have any logic to handle clamping it back down. I remember this one. This one annoyed me so much as a kid. He says, go to the next room, but what he means is bomb this wall. I like this super powerful sword that we got. Does a lot of damage to these guys. These are my least favorite enemies in the game. They're so difficult. Ganon works pretty much the same way when you fight him. We're just modifying the memory, like the random access memory that the game uses, like basically all of the scratch space that it uses to do computations while the game's running. We haven't actually made any modifications to the code itself yet. And so if we want to take any of these changes and make them persist, we're actually going to need to go through and figure out how to make the equivalent changes in the actual code of the game. But we're not going to take most of these hacks that we're doing just to debug things and figure out how stuff works. So hopefully we can just do the minimum necessary to make this stuff work. I think we're on the right track. Yep, there we go. All right, this is the room right before the boss. So I'm going to get rid of these little bee things. I forget what this guy is called. All right, so the first thing we should do is checkpoint, because I've been bad about doing that. So we'll save our state. And then let's look at how this boss battle works. All right, so we hold up our Triforce to bring him out. And then, if I remember correctly, the only way to defeat him is actually just by anticipating where he's going to be and hitting him with your sword. Which is really annoying. Tough fight. It'd be nice if we could just eliminate this boss battle altogether. I'm not having much success here. Come on. Okay, there's one hit. Oh, 2 hits. That glitch sword takes Ganon out in 2 hits. That's awesome. Okay, then you hit him with that, and then he gibs kind of gruesomely. Oh, okay. Interesting. So that's right. He drops his own Triforce. So it's like you have one of them, and then he has one, and then Zelda has one. And that's how the fiction always works. But it looks like this door doesn't open until we pick up that Triforce, which means that if the player has that, I'm guessing this boss fight doesn't even happen. I'm thinking that the door is probably just open. So let's try. Let's reset this and figure out where that is stored in our inventory. Cool. Let's figure out, see if we can find where that's stored. Hey! I don't know how we keep getting so lucky. We're in just like 2 searches, find exactly the variable that we're looking for. Yeah, and this is totally in the range of variables that we've been looking at so far. So that's a 1 now. And let's... somebody's going to watch this video and be like, that's actually called the Triforce of something. I think what that means is now that we've beaten the boss and that door is unlocked, if we come back in here, we can come out this exit instead of talking to Zelda, and then instead of this, like because we have the item, the door should just open, and that should be it. Okay, so I think all we need to do is make sure that the player has the Triforce of Power in their inventory before they go into the boss fight. We can test that by loading up our previous checkpoint. Let's go ahead and give ourselves this Triforce. And then... oh, there's the boss fight, but the door's open. Which means... okay, cool. So that means if the player starts with that Triforce in their inventory at the beginning of the game, then they won't have to fight Ganon, and they'll be able to get all the way through it. Okay, so we've got everything that we need now to do this. Okay, so I think what I want to do is, I think the minimum hack that we can make is if we take that first room where you normally get the sword, and make it so that when you pick up the sword, instead of picking up the sword, you pick up the Triforce that Ganon has, which is memory location 672. This will all just work. So the sword is in memory location 657, and so let's go find the line of code that gives us the sword when we walk into this thing down here. All right. Okay, so this is the thing that's giving us the sword. And this address right here is the 657 address. So this is the opcode for the store instruction, and this is the address that it's storing at. And so all we have to do is modify this code in the ROM. The way that this is organized is it's showing us the ROM offsets. And so if we scroll into a later portion of the memory, you can see that they have these full addresses here. And we can toggle this thing to control whether or not it's showing us what's called the segment. So like the NES doesn't have very much memory. And so when you have a program that has lots of code in it, it has to take chunks of that code and load it into memory at a time. And the way that that's regulated is via segments. But it looks like this version of, it looks like Zelda does something that's relatively uncommon, where it actually uploads that into RAM and then executes the code directly in RAM. And what that means is that this code that we're looking at this breakpoint, we can't just directly modify because we are in code that has been loaded into RAM. So we're going to have to find where that code gets loaded from in the ROM and modify it there. So we can go look at, this hex editor will show us the memory of the ROM file, and we can just search for some hex that corresponds to these instructions. So it looks like that sequence is 995706. There's one. Okay, so there's a bunch of those. So we're going to have to be more specific. We can just grab the instruction chain that follows after it until we uniquely identify this thing. COOBDO19. Maybe that's enough. So there's no instances of that below us. No instances above. Oh wait. I think I luckily COOBDO19. Okay, yeah, this is the code. All right, so we happen to be in the right place in memory already. So let us, okay, so 99 is the operand, 0657 is, this address is spread across these 2 bytes. And we want it to be 0672, so we just need to change this 57 to a 72. And then, since that code has already been loaded into RAM, we won't be modifying the RAM copy. So what we actually want to do is reset at this point. So when we grab our sword, we don't have a sword, which is good. I don't think it shows you whether you have this Triforce in your inventory, but we should be able to look at that location in memory and verify that we have it. So let's go to 672. Yep, that's a 1-bit. Okay, so we modified the code so that when you pick that up, you have the Triforce instead, which means that we made a 1-byte change to Zelda that makes it possible to do a swordless playthrough. You still have to go grab that for a sword, but it's really the Triforce. Okay, so the next thing that I want to do, I just want to show one other cool thing that you can do when you're hacking ROMs that allows you to make some cool modifications. So let's just reset to title screen. And then I want to show you, if you come into this hex editor here, come up into this menu, there's a thing here called a TBL file. And a TBL file is, I'll show you what it looks like. So I made this one before we started because we had done a puzzle for Hack and Slash earlier that involved making some IPS changes to Zelda. If we look at this file, well, it's big font. Basically, all it says is this value in memory is treated as this character in the display. And so Zelda's character is actually, the 0 byte corresponds to 0. It's not ASCII or anything like that. But you can see like all the way up to like the first 16 letters, it matches 1 for 1. And then the numbers just keep going up and showing, and going on and on to these symbols that show up in the font. But if we load that file in here, it'll actually show us in this column over here a translation of that memory into that character mapping that we established. So what you can actually do is just scroll through this. And most of these values will be code or things like that, but if we, that won't translate to anything meaningful. But if we keep our eye out, we'll start to see these strings that are actually used by the game. And then we can go modify them. So let's say, for example, let's go find, here we go. So we can actually see the text over here that says it's dangerous to go alone.
There's more too.
Yeah, it looks like these are all of the phrases that people in the overworld say. So you can come in here and modify all of these. So this is interesting too. It looks like the high bit here. This doesn't say, you see the G and the dot. If we change this to a 1, I'm guessing that this will say go. So that means that that high bit actually indicates that there's a new line there because that's the last word on that line. Let's change this to hack. We'll just make it say B. So if we make that change to the ROM and we reset, I don't think we put the Terminator in there, so now it's going to tell us all of the... Let's leave it like that. I like the glitchy effect. I think that works. All right, cool. All right, so we have all the changes that we want to make now. I'm just going to come in here, and then I'm going to say save ROM as, and then let's call it Zelda Explorers. Let's just test to make sure that it works clean without all of our patches and stuff installed. Use the hack and slash lead character's name this time. All right. So I think I'm going to leave the health, actually. It'll keep the game nice and challenging. It'll just have it be a very minimal hack that allows this feature to be completed. All right, and so now we're ready to flash this onto our ROM and then put it into our cartridge. All right. So I'm going to put it into our ROM programmer here. Lock it into place. And then we can just load this ROM that we constructed. And then all we have to do is use the programmer to write it. And it's going to copy the ROM onto this physical device. It'll take a little bit. EEPROMs are a little bit slow to read and write from. Because EEPROMs are a little finicky, there's also a verify step where we basically read back all of the memory that we wrote to the cartridge and make sure it lines up with the file that we expect it to. All right, it looks like the verify was successful. I'm going to run it again manually just to make sure. And you know what, let's actually even read the whole thing back and boot it back up in the emulator and make sure that it's functioning correctly. Theoretically, this should work now. Like our little ROM should
or it might burst into flames.
Yeah, it might burst into flames, right? If we send too much power, this thing will get hot, and then we might ruin 2 players' NES. But let's just try it.
Hey, it's not our NES.
So I made one last change off camera to the ROM, which is that I changed the story. I decided that instead of save the princess kind of story, that obviously I know better than Nintendo, and came up with a better storyline for the game. So give that a shot and see if it works.
All right, let's give it a shot.
I couldn't quite get all the colors to line up because of the thing, but I was pretty happy with it. It's got a nice kind of glitchy thing going into it.
That's pretty cool.
Boot in and see if you can try and grab the sword. All right. Make sure that's working too.
All right, get the sword?
Yeah.
Let's do it.
It's totally intentional. Well, it's not. It was an accident, but I like how glitchy it is. So we're going to keep it.
Yeah, it works for me.
But yeah, so I think what we should do is give this cartridge away. And I was trying to think of what we should do for like deciding who gets it. And I also changed the text at the very end of the game when you get to Zelda. And so what I'll do is I'll post the patch file for the ROM in the description of the video. So if you take that patch file and apply it to a Zelda ROM that you presumably legally obtained and ripped from the cartridge as well, and then either just play through the game legit and get to Zelda, or if you just hack on it yourself and figure out what she says, tweet it at me. I'm at NOUGHTCERATOPS, which is not Ceratops, or just tweet it at the Double Fine Twitter account and show us that you got to the end of the game and saw what Zelda has to say about the situation now. And the very first person to do that will get in contact with you and we'll ship you the physical cartridge that we built.
See, now I am totally screwed. And with that,
let's call it good.
Let's call it.
All right.
All right, cool.
This is a fun project. Thanks for helping me with it, man.
Yeah, thank you. That's awesome.